Hi, Dave Scotland for cgswot.com, and today's tutorial we're going to take a bit of a sneak peek at one of the workshops available, and we have a workshop available for exploring 3D Studio Max standard lighting. Now this workshop is specifically designed for you to go through the standard lighting tools that come boxed with 3D Studio Max, and that is we won't be using any of the advanced lighting solutions like Mental Ray, and we won't be using any external plugins like V-Ray. We're only going to be using the standard lighting that's been available in Max for years now, and we're really going to try to push the envelope for what's available in that standard lighting tools, and we're going to go through some really good tricks and tips on how to speed your lighting setups up, and hopefully you'll gain a greater understanding of lighting itself. And even if you do turn to advanced solutions, this knowledge of lighting and how to set it up, you can bring that into that advanced lighting scenario as well, and to have a better understanding of lighting can only ever improve your work. Now it's a workshop that basically goes through, we do character lighting, which is ideal for modelers or anyone wanting to present some geometry to a director or in your portfolio. We do a nice little lighting rig for character lighting. We do an exterior day lighting rig using the Sky Dome lighting feature, which is a standard max light. And then we do an interior day shot using only standard lighting, and then we do the same interior scene as a night shot, and then we do an exterior day shot using standard lighting and an exterior night shot using standard lighting. So it really covers the bases. It's great value, and I thoroughly suggest that if you want to really sort of gain a greater understanding of what's available in that standard lighting tool set in 3D Studio Max, that you have a look at the workshop. Today we're going to have a look at the interior scene for a day lit scenario. So without any further ado, let's start the tutorial. So it's a pretty ugly looking scene at the moment, but the geometry's not too bad and the materials aren't too bad. So with a bit of lighting, we can certainly bring this up to spec. So let's go ahead and get started. The lighting decisions that we need to make is where we're going to have our main source of light coming from. And if I just go to a top view and show you in wireframe, we've got our bed here, camera's sitting here. I want the main key light to come through this window, which is over here off to the right of the camera. And so we're going to make that our key light direction over here, and then some of the other lighting decisions are going to be basically based around some of the other geometry features within the scene. So we've got another window over here and another window over here in this small alcove, and so there will be some light coming through those windows, but it won't be key light. It'll be secondary light coming from the outside environment, the day-lit outside environment. So we need to replicate that in some way, just using our standard lights. And there'll be some bounce light and fill light coming off the walls and the furniture. And so they're the sort of decisions that we need to be aware of as we move forward. So we can go ahead and get started with our key light. So if we just select a target direct, and we're just going to click outside here and drag it sort of into the center of the room there somewhere. About there is fine. And then we're just going to go to we'll go to a front view and make sure our target is on the ground, on the floor, which it is. So now we can right click, go into views, and go into that target 01 or that direct 01 light. So we're in the light view there. We can rename our light. So we'll just go to our modify panel now, rename it key, hit enter, and we'll change a few parameters here now. We're just going to change the color, start off with a pure white, and then just wind in a little bit of yellow just to warm it up a little bit, and just a little bit of red as well. And we'll go OK to that, and we'll make the key multiplier 1.2 to start with, and we're going to use shadow mapping. So we'll switch on shadow maps, we'll slide it down, we'll make sure our diffuse and specular are ticked, and what we can do in the viewport here, we can just click our orbit light tool down the bottom and we can orbit the light up. And the beauty of seeing through the light is that we can actually see what the light is going to hit in the scene. And so we've got our window here, and the light's going to be coming through that window. And so if we bring it up a little bit, slide it back just a bit, something like that, I think is going to work fine. And given that it's only going to come through the window, the fall off area out here is quite okay. You could easily bring the fall off area in into something like this, and it just saves a little bit of calculation for calculating shadows. So that's going to work okay. Now we can come down to our shadow map parameters for that light, and we're going to make the key light pretty high in map size. We'll go 3K, so we'll go 3072 on that. Sample range, we don't need two-sided shadows. Sample range, we'll probably run the sample range around about 20, and BIOS set to 0. Density is fine. Everything else about the light seems to be okay, so that looks pretty good. We'll go back to our camera view now and we'll see what we have. And that's looking pretty good. We've got our key light spilling through the window. It's hitting our bed and hitting the floor here, and I think that's going to work okay. The reason why there's some visibility happening on some of these other elements that are in the dark is, once again, it's just reflection settings in the map. If I bring up my map editor, I can highlight the legs of the bed, and it's this material here, and you'll see that the reflection map that I've placed in the map slot there is a little bit high, so we'll bring that down to about 20, and we might even just leave the diffuse color there. There's another map here that needs to come down a little bit as well. Bring that down to about 20, and probably increase the glossiness on that map just a bit as well, and that should be fine. I've got a feeling they're the window sills. Yeah, they are. We had an instant sort of reaction there, and that's working okay. So the key light's set up and that's ready to go. Now we can do some fill lights, and similar to our character setup, we're going to be using the cardinal fill lights, and given that we've got 4 walls that are going to be sort of bouncing the light around the room, it sort of makes sense to have the 4 directions for the fill lights. So we'll go with a free direct. We'll just click pretty much in the center of the room here in a front view, and then we'll go to a top view. I'm using the Z key to zoom to my geometry when I go to a new view, so if I went to a left view I can hit Z and it just snaps to the center of my selection. So in a top view, I'm just going to slide that back a little bit, and then we're going to move its pivot point. Move the pivot point to the center of the room, and we'll rename in the modify panel here, we'll rename it fill, and we'll change some of the settings. We're going to go 0.35 on the fill, and there's no shadows. We'll go with a color. We'll just sort of bring a little bit of that yellow out of it a little bit, and that's probably going to do us. We'll come down. We don't need attenuation, but what we do need is to take the specular off in the light, and everything else is fine. So we can rotate that now, shift, and make sure our angle snap is switched on at the top here. Shift, rotate around 90 degrees. We want an instance, and we want 3 copies of it. So there's our 4 fill lights created. We'll just go to a front sort of camera view and just see how they're working. Now you'll see there that our fall off is not working. It's not encompassing the whole scene. So we'll just go back to a front view, and we'll make sure we can select this this front fill light here, and we'll go to the fall off, and we can wind it up here similar to our light view tools that we had down the bottom. We can just wind the outer amount out past our geometry, and the inner amount out past our geometry as well. Now if we go back to our camera view, give that a render. Okay, so we've got our fill lights working there now, and the next thing we need to do is we'll probably get our bounce and our top fill sorted. So we'll just go to a front view and we'll select our bottom, one of our fill lights. This one out to the right here is fine, and we'll shift and rotate to the top and as a copy, not an instance, and we'll just call it top fill. We'll go OK. We'll bring that down a little bit, and what we're going to do is exclude the ceiling and these little downlight discs. So we've got our ceiling there, and we've got these little orange downlight discs that are called downlight. So just go back to our front view, select the light, top fill, and then we're going to find the in the general parameters we've got our exclude. Now if we click that, it brings up this little window here, and we can exclude geometry from being affected by the light. So we can hit C and it'll bring up ceiling there, and then we can hit down and we can bring up that downlight geometry. There's about 9 of them. We'll go OK to that, and it's excluding both shadow casting and illumination. So we'll go OK to that, and the top fill, we'll go about 0.2 on that, and we'll probably just go for a little bit more of a neutral, sort of a blue hint to it. Something like that is fine. And what we're going to do that's unique to the top fill is we're going to switch on the shadows, and we're going to we'll probably change the shadow parameters. We'll come down here, leave the specular off, come down, and in the shadow map parameters we're going to go 2048 on that, and we'll slide the sample range all the way up, which it goes to 50. Now we'll come back to our camera, give that a render, and what that's actually created, you'll see that there's a little bit of darkness happening underneath the bed, happening underneath objects within the scene, and that's going to really help just sell a little bit more depth, a little bit more sort of GI feel to it. I've got a little tiny speck of light coming through my ceiling there, and I've got a feeling it's this this piece of framework here. I'm just going to bump it up a little bit, see if we can get rid of that. Yep, that's fixed it. So that seems to be working okay so far. So we now need to put in our bounce light. So we'll go to our front view and wireframe, and we're just going to grab that same fill light, rotate it around 90 degrees to the bottom, and we'll just call it bounce as a copy. We'll go OK to that. We need to exclude the floor, although we're not using shadows, so it really, it doesn't really matter, but pays to be neat. So we'll exclude the floor, and for the bounce light we'll give it a multiplier of about 0.2, and we'll change go similar to the ceiling light, just a little bit of sort of neutral blue in there, and we'll go OK. And that should be okay for bounce light. We'll just go back to our camera view, give that a quick render, and we're getting some nice light up on the ceiling now, and the fills seem to be working okay. So now we've got to do, I guess you could call it secondary light. It's basically light that's caused within the scene from bouncing off objects, and picking the more obvious sources of light within the scene. So before we get on to some of these windows, what we're going to do is select and create an ambient light within the scene. So if I just go to a top view, bearing in mind that the key light is coming through this window here, and it's hitting the floor sort of in this area here, that's pretty much where I want to create my ambient light. Now ambient lights tend to, it doesn't matter where you create them, because they're non-directional and they just have a global lighting value throughout the whole scene. But where it starts to become important where you place them is when you start to use attenuation. Now what we're going to do is create an omni light in this area about here, and then we're just going to we'll rename it ambient, and we're going to give it a color value. We'll give it a color value sort of that sort of comes from the room a little bit. So bring in a little bit of yellow, something like that is fine, and we'll go okay. The multiplier will probably go about 0.25 on the multiplier, and then the important part is to attenuate it correctly. So what we go, well, first we need to switch it to ambient. So switch that to ambient only, and then in the attenuation settings here, in the intensity, color and attenuation tab, what we're going to do is put show, and straight away we get these two circles, which are actually spheres in 3D space. Anything outside of the dark sphere receives no ambient light from this light. Anything inside of the light sphere is 100% of the multiplier value for the light. So what we want to do is just wind that out, wind the outer amount out just past the walls of the far side of the room here, and then the inside amount we're going to wind down to 0, and then we're going to hit use. So if we just go to our camera view again and give that a render, you'll notice that we're getting this ambient light that's spilling across the room, and the values on this wall is actually lighter than the value on the far wall, and that's just that attenuation working the way we needed it to work. So that's working fine. So we have our ambient light there now. Okay, so we can bring up our tools and have a look at our light lister, and then we have our key light. We've got our 4 fills, and because they're instances, they're in a little drop down list here. They share all of these settings. We've got our top fill, our bounce and our ambient. So from a render, it's coming along quite nicely, but we're missing some key light sources. There will be some light spilling in through these windows, and at the moment our key light is not visible as a light source. It's actually just the product of what the light is doing when it hits surfaces, because it's a direct light. It's a target direct light. So we're only getting the product as it hits the surface. So we need to emulate the sort of spilling of that key direction, or the key light from that key direction into the room. And that's what we'll move on to now. So if we just go to a top view, what we're going to do is create our first source light, and it'll be an ambient light, an omni light. So if we click omni, what we're going to do is click right on the line of the wall. So if we come in here a little bit tighter, the pink line there is the wall, and what we want to do is just bring it just inside the wall. If we leave it out, given that we're going to use some shadows, then we're going to have this entire wall here is actually not going to receive any light from it. So what we need to do is just make sure it's just inside that wall. Now we've got attenuation happening there. Just to make life a little easier, I'm going to select this ambient light, and I'm just going to click off show. As long as use stays on, then we'll be fine for that. Now we'll go to the light we've just created. We're going to rename that to key source, and we're going to give it a value of quite high, 0.7, because we're going to be using some attenuation with it as well. So similar to the ambient light attenuation, we're just going to switch that on, and we're going to wind it out a little bit past the edge of the room, and the start attenuation is at 0. So that should be working okay, but what we need to do is come to a front view and make sure that it is up level with the center of the window instead of down on the floor there. So let's go ahead and change our shadow settings for that. Let's switch the shadows on. We're going to slide down. Specular is switched on, and we'll keep coming down. The density is at 1. light effect shadow is ticked, that's fine. And what we're going to do is change our size to 2048. And we're going to slam up our sample range all the way to the top at 50. And that should look okay. So let's go into our camera view now and give that a bit of a render. Now, as you can tell, that has made a huge difference to how the room feels, and so the importance of that source light, not just the obvious effect, which is where it hits surfaces like here on the bed and on the floor from the target direct. The way it spills across the room, you have to really cater for that. So this is something that a lot of people miss in this process, and it's very important that you understand how this works. And we're getting some really nice soft shadows, even though it's not coming from the target direct, we're still getting some nice soft shadows from the lamps here, up in this alcove up here, even in the windowsill, round the back of this alcove over the side. So really crucial that you include these lights. Now, we've got two other light sources here, and we need to do something about those as well. So what we can do is grab that light and shift and drag over to the other window. And what we'll call this one is we'll call this window near as a copy. We'll go OK to it. We'll slide in a little bit, and what we need to do is make sure that that the positioning of it is correct within the window. So we need to just bring it in so that it's right on the edge of the actual window frame, like so. Now, there is some glass in that window, so if I just go back to a camera view into a shaded mode and I click, there is actual glass in the window, and we need to make sure that this light does not react to that glass. So we'll use our exclude include again. We'll exclude, it's called, in this instance it's called window, and we'll just add that in. We might as well add the other window in there as well. That way we can duplicate the light. And what we need to do is probably bring from a top view, we need to bring our attenuation in a little bit. So let's bring that in and probably put it somewhere around there, so that it's just sort of spilling across the bed, and it's getting as far as this sort of the second lamp on the nightstand over here. Something like that is fine. And we've got to make sure that our height position is correct, and it looks pretty good. It's sort of halfway in the window. And what we can do is probably reduce, because it's not a key source for lighting. We need to reduce the multiplier, so we're going to put that down to about 0.4, and the shadows and everything else we will be fine with. We could really amend the color a little bit, bring a little bit of blue into it, take a bit of red out, and that's just going to leave us with this just light green hue. Given that we've got heaps of trees outside there, and just a hint is all you need. So that's looking pretty good. Let's give that a render. And that's working okay. We're getting a little bit of a highlight on the windowsill here, but I think it's working okay. And we'll just make sure that attenuation is on. Yes, it is. So that seems to be working okay here, and then we're getting some nice sort of shadow falling down on this nightstand here, and that's going okay. So let's go to a front view now, and wireframe. What we're going to do is shift and copy that over to the other window. But notice that the other window has some blinds in it. So we'll rename this as far as a copy. We'll go OK. And in a camera view, you can see that there are some blinds in that window. And what we need to do is line up our light with the opening of the light source, which is down here, not in the middle of the window. It's relative to where the blinds finish and the bottom of the window frame there. So somewhere about there is fine. And what we're going to do is probably ramp this one up a little bit higher, and I'll show you why. If I give that a render, it's not working too bad, but I need to just make sure that my position is correct in the top view here with that light. Come forward just a little bit, but stay. We'll try it in front of the blinds and just see how we go there. That's worked a lot better. Notice now that we don't have this harsh shadow from the blinds, and we're getting some spill light out onto the wall over here. We're getting this soft shadow from the chair, and I think that's working nicely. The rear corner is just a little bit dark, so what we might do is just bring the multiplier up to 0.6 and just see what it looks like. We don't want it too high. And the other thing, notice at the top here we're getting this spill light on the ceiling. So what we can do is I might just drop that back to 0.5. We'll exclude the ceiling and see if it makes any difference to that light. I think that's working a little bit better now. The ceiling's getting some spill light from other lights in the scene, and I think that works a bit better than that harsh sort of hot spot that was happening up on the top there. So that's just about it. I think we're just about done there. What we could do is have a look at a little bit of exposure control. I'll just clone that render and shut this down. We'll go into our exposure control and we'll just bring up our automatic exposure. Just bring up our automatic exposure there, and we'll do a little preview render inside, and we'll see what our default settings look like. Yeah, it's not pretty. I think what we're going to need to do if we do use our exposure control is to just bring our brightness up to 55. See if that makes a little bit of difference there. That brings it up a little bit, and we're just getting this nice sort of fall off on these exposed areas. Could probably bring up a little bit of exposure value, just 0.08. Give that a render, and I think that's looking pretty good. Our bounce light from the bottom, we could probably have a quick look at our bounce light from the bottom. Just the value, let's bring that up to 0.25 and see if that makes a little bit of difference to the ceiling. I think that works a lot better. Okay, it looks to me like the windows aren't reflecting as they should be, so let's just have a quick look at that. Make sure we get our window there. Bring up our window material. It's set to ray trace. It's set to 60. It could be that we need something for it to reflect onto. So what we're just going to do, you'll notice from a top view that we do have some geometry happening over on the far side of the room here. What I'm going to do is grab this fill light at the back, and I'm just going to make it unique, and then I'm just going to rise that up to about 0.45. Go back to my camera, just see if that's made a bit of difference in the reflection. Just not getting any reflection there. I might just go in and check that my rendering is working. My ray tracing, yeah, it's all switched on. Might go for something a little bit full on here just to test it. I'm just going to create a sphere right in front of the window. Just move it up and just see if we're getting some reflection of that sphere. It doesn't look like we're getting any reflection on that window, so let's try and make sure that our material's two-sided. And I'm just going to hide that plane. I'm just going to hide the background. Whoop, hide the background plane. Hide selected. Just give that a render. I'll just change my background to black so we can see if we're getting any detail in it. We're just not getting any detail in that window, and I can't really work out why. So let's go to a top view, we'll zoom in here, and we'll see what we can see. Flat plane, and we'll make sure that the ray trace auto detect, that's correct. Give it 100%. Top view, just line that back up with our window. Out there, camera. I'll just see if our exposure control has actually done anything to that reflection. It's the exposure control, and I think if we come down a little bit further on this, process background and environment maps, that's what we were missing. So we'll go back into our material editor. Be aware of that if you come across it, and this will give you a great example of how I like to do these tutorials. Sometimes you'll come up against these sorts of things as you move forward, and you need to know how to assess what the issue is. So in the reflection there, we'll drop that back down to 60 again, give that a render, and that's working okay. We can probably undo our, just go to a top view, undo the change we made to the light at the back here. It was 0.35. We need to change this back to 0.35, and we need to unhide the background plane, come back in and give that a render and see how we go. So there's our room, our interior lit scene, and I think it's working quite nicely, and I think you'll agree that the product for standard lighting, and only standard lighting without any skylight or GI, is pretty good. It's a great place to start, and then as you add GI and various other elements, you will have a scene that is really quite believable. Okay, so that's it for the interior scene, and that's been lit with only 3D Studio Max standard lighting. There's been no advanced lighting used or third-party lighting plugins. And I thoroughly suggest that you have a look at the standard lighting workshop that's available. It's great value, and you basically get the character lighting, exterior day lighting, interior day and night lighting, and exterior day and night lighting. The exterior up the top here is the light dome lighting scenario. So it's, like I said, it's great value, and if you want to really understand lighting a little bit better, or just basically want to use the lighting tools that are available out of the box for 3D Studio Max without turning to advanced lighting or a third-party lighting or rendering solution, then it really pays to understand that standard lighting and those tools. So this is a great way to get into that, and it certainly fills the void if you haven't tackled any lighting before. So that's it for me. Until next time, bye for now.